With a career spanning writing, editing, and reimagining fantasy literature, this author was born and raised in Texas and has left quite an impression on the literary landscape. From graphic novels to memoirs, his work resonates with readers of all ages, offering insight, empathy, and often a touch of magic. Among his celebrated books stand his memoir, Free Lunch, a poignant narrative that captures the essence of resilience and triumph in the face of adversity. Join me in welcoming the multi-talented author of almost 100 books, Rex Ogles.
Hi, everybody. How's it going?
Childhood reading experiences often shape individuals in profound ways. Can you share some of the books that made an impact on you growing up? How do you think they influenced your journey to becoming an author?
I think, as far as I can remember, the first books I was reading were Dr. Seuss. There's something about such colorful images, so playful, so just like, oh my God, they were just so much fun. And of course, the rhyming was, great, and the big words that didn't mean anything, that were nonsensical. From an early age, I just really loved stories. They resonated with me. And as I got older, stuff in life got a little more difficult for me. Books were an escape. So I remember reading Chronicles of Narnia and, just stepping through that wardrobe into another world. It was very much like reading a book, and you're just opening a book, turning the pages, and then you're somewhere else. I love that.
Drugs, smoking, social media, and I think books are a good way to cope with the many troubles you have in life.
Yeah. I mean, honestly, that's why I started writing, was because for me, reading stories was an escape, but I also found that if I started creating stories, that was a whole other escape, because I could control that world. I had, as a child, we have limited control in our lives, in the world around us. So to become a writer, even at an early age, you're taking back that power, you're taking on the agency, and you're able to do things that you might not be able to do in the real world. And I think there's something very empowering about that.
Your memoir, Free Lunch, bravely discusses your experiences with poverty, domestic violence, and mental health challenges. How did writing this book help you process these difficult experiences, and what message do you hope readers can take away from it?
It was weird, because I mean, telling my story is not something I wanted to do. It's always something I've been ashamed of. I've been embarrassed of. It's stuff I don't want to really talk about. But as I was writing, I was like, I've come such a far way, and I survived, and that's the most important thing. Was that at the time I was living it, I didn't know if I would survive, but now I'm able to look back and relive those experiences and say, you know what, this happened and it was terrible, but you survived it, and it made you a stronger person. You came out the other side. And I hope that, for me, I felt very alone going through those things. I mean, mind you, it was the 80s, and it was a different world. We didn't have the internet, so I felt very alone a lot of the time. But I think even now, even with all this social media and with kids having access, like, I still think that people going through difficult situations can feel very alone. So I think, writing this book makes people feel seen. And I think that's so important, because so many youth grow up feeling invisible. I mean, this is not what I set out to accomplish as I wrote, but as I've met with hundreds of teachers and educators and students, like, so many of them have hit me up, direct messages on social media, and said, this really resonated with me. Thank you for writing this. Like, it makes me feel seen. And that's just been really rewarding in itself. So I'm happy that my stories are reaching readers who need it.
Banned books often spark conversations about censorship and freedom of expression. As someone who has worked extensively in children's literature, how do you view the importance of challenging controversial topics in literature? And have any of your works faced challenges or bans?
One of my first graphic novels under my pen name, REY TERCIERO, was Meg, Jo, Beth, and Amy, which is a modern day, middle grade, diverse reimagining of Louisa May Alcott's Little Women. I loved that book when I was a kid, because there were so few stories, it felt like, that represented people who were lower income or lower middle class, or even impoverished. Like the Little Women family, they were struggling. The dad was off at war. It was a single mom household because the dad was gone. The girls were having to help their mom, help their neighbors. People lived through difficult times. So for me, I was like, I'm going to write this story. I'm going to make it modern day. And and it was really fun, like taking a story that I loved and reimagining it and putting my stamp on it. Well, it got banned. It was just in one parish in Louisiana, although I later heard that it also got banned in Katy, Texas. But I'm more familiar with the case in Louisiana, which is that so people brought it up and they're like, there's a queer character in it. And it probably didn't help that half the family was black because it was a mixed race family. This is the South. Let's be honest. I've lived in Alabama and the South most of my life, so I know that there's still a lot of rampant racism going on. So whether it was about people of color or whether it was because there was a queer character, the book was banned. But luckily, I think the librarians rallied and they came back and, a while later, I don't know how long it took, but eventually they got the book back on the shelves. And that's so awesome and so important. And I get that there's a lot of controversy around books, but I think I've always been under the notion that where there is conflict, there is growth. And I think, having these open discussions helps, I don't want to say small-minded people, but people with maybe a limited worldview or with smaller access to diversity in their lives. Like, I think it's important to have this brought up for them to see it, for them to be able to engage with it. It may ring on deaf ears, but hopefully it resonates with the next generation. Maybe the adults or the old people who are hearing this now. They're of their generation, they're of their time, and they don't hear it, but maybe their kids will, maybe their neighbors will. So while banning books on the surface is awful, and I think it's terrible, and it's very dystopian, I think it's important. I think it's great to have an open dialogue with our neighbors and to just have the conversation of why this is difficult. And if everyone listens to each other, I think hopefully we'll have a really good resolution all around.
Your work spans across different genres and age groups, from middle grade children's book to graphic novels. How do you approach tailoring your writing style and themes to suit different audiences? And do you have a favorite genre or age group to write for?
That's a good question. So, my whole life, since I was young, I wanted to write stories. I love books. In middle school, I discovered comic books and I was like mind blown because, it's like somewhere between a book and a movie or a cartoon. Like you have pages, but you have art, you have words, and you can do so much in a visual format that you can't necessarily do in TV or movies. But that's why like cartoons are so great because again, you can do anything. Like the world is your oyster, and you can make it as fantastical as you want, or whatever. It's just like it's so great to work in different mediums. Prose the same way. You can do anything because there's no visual component. I love writing prose. That was my first love. I started off wanting to write horror like Stephen King or Anne Rice. And then, of course, I wanted to be the next J.K. Rowling because I love fantasy. I love science fiction. And then, I was working in comic books professionally. Like I moved to New York. I was like, I'm trailer trash. I'm not a natural born writer, but I want to write. I need to go learn from the professionals. So I moved to New York City when I was 22, 23. And I got a job at Marvel Comics and DC Comics and Scholastic and Little Brown. And I was an editor and I was learning from all these great writers and all these great editors. And, I was learning about the world I love so much from a business standpoint, which was really good because I needed to understand it better. But while I was doing that, like I really realized like I love all ages comic books, like Superman, Batman, X-Men, like it's for all ages. Adults can read it, kids can read it. There's violence, but there's not necessarily a lot of sex and drugs. Like I love to buy myself Lego still. I still like love to go to toy stores. I'm just a big kid. And I wanted to make books for what I would have loved when I was that age. So I started working on middle grade stuff. I started working on young adult stuff. Like you said, I do graphic novels. I do prose. I do in verse, which is my favorite. That's so hard to say. But I will say that the thing about graphic novels that I love is that there's such a visual component. And I think like now with this new generation who's growing up on technology, everything on the phone, everything on the internet, online, like it's all a hybrid of visual and word. And I would have to say graphic novels.
And before we conclude, could you share with us any exciting projects you're currently working on?
Yeah, I'm not sure which ones have been announced because I forget. Because I've always wanted to do this, and now that I am, I'm writing as much as possible, and I have 11 books in the pipeline, which is super exciting. They're all coming out over like the next 5 years. The classic, the Odyssey, because I loved Greek mythology as a kid, but it's anthropomorphic, so it's all animals, and it's just the artist is amazing. Visually, it's beautiful. My next book coming out from Scholastic is going to be Weirdo, which is the third in the trilogy for Four Eyes and Pizza Face. And that is Four Eyes is sixth grade, Pizza Face is seventh grade, and Weirdo is eighth grade. So it's kind of concluding my middle school journey. So that's super exciting, graphic novel. And then I have a book coming out this May called Road Home, coming out from Norton, which kind of completes the trilogy of Free Lunch and Punching Bag. And it's about my dad kicking me out for being gay when I was 18 and the 3 months that I was homeless afterwards. Easily the most difficult story I've ever written in my life. But there's like 2.8 million kids who are living on the street in today's America. So again, I think it's an important story, and I hope that my book educates people, and hopefully people in similar situations can read it and feel seen. So very excited for all of my books.
Rex Ogle's storytelling spans genres and generations, deeply resonating with audiences. His openness in sharing vulnerability and personal experiences, like the one you just shared about your father, has touched countless readers, myself included. Thank you, Rex, for your time and allowing us insight into your remarkable journey.
Thank you so much for having me, and take care, everybody out there. Hope you're well.